So thank you, Constantine, for joining us for this evening for a career, retrospective on your wonderful career. Um, so the first thing I want to do is just ask you how you began your career in the first place. What attracted you to acting, and how did you go about pursuing that path?
Well, actually, it's a very odd one, that, because first of all, thank you for inviting me of my very modest career. It was very strange. I was absolutely imbued with theatre and film from a very early age.
Mhm.
Luckily, lived in London. My mother was very keen on theatre. We went to a lot of theatre. I went to a lot of film. And at school, I was always the leading actor and all of that. And I saw, I mean, even then, I was in my teens, I was really interested in the foreign movies, the new wave, Truffaut, Kurosawa, Bergman. I went to see all these films. Sometimes when I was in the holidays, I was at boarding school. I would go to 2 movies a day. And we were very lucky in London because we had 3 main films for foreign movies. There was the Academy in Oxford Street. There was the Curzon Cinema in Curzon Street and the Paris Pullman. And even at school, I started a school film club because in those days you could rent films and if you were a club, the censorship, the certificate didn't matter. So you could show X films at school, that kind of thing. That was quite quickly stopped because I showed a film called Les Diaboliques, which was a wonderful kind of horror film. Well, no, a thriller, which was deemed to be very unsuitable for the younger children. That stopped. Anyway, what was so bizarre, and I myself don't really understand it, it never occurred to me to be an actor. It didn't enter my head. And I know when one has, when there are interviews with actors, they say, oh, I saw Olivier play Othello, and at that moment I knew that's all I wanted to do. I never had that epiphany. I went to university, and there was a very active theatre group at the university. In those days, you couldn't study drama at university. The only 2 universities offered drama courses. One was Bristol and one was Manchester. Or you went to a drama school. Well, I didn't want to go to drama school. Well, as I said, I didn't think of being an actor. So I went to university to read economics, which I did to my utter pain. It was so boring. But this drama group, which had to be self-sufficient. The university didn't give us any money. We had to pay rent on our tiny little theatre. And this was in Dublin. And we had to compete with the Dublin professional theatres in order to make enough money to keep ourselves going, costumes and sets and so forth. Tiny little theatre, sat about 65, 70 people. So it was very, very intimate, which is something I have loved all my life, is really small, intimate spaces. And so having been a big sort of star in school plays, I was suddenly starting to have to play the little parts, but that soon changed. And then I had some success in Dublin as an actor and so forth. And I thought, well, actually, this is what I want to do. I really, really want to do this. And I left university, not knowing anyone. And I didn't want to go to drama school. I didn't want to go to school again, having been at school for so long. And I just started cold. I did have one, I had a couple of breaks. We had a very successful review that ran in the summer term, and that led me to be invited to do a review at a festival in Belfast, a drama festival. And I was actually paid at that time a huge amount of money. It was £150 to play in this show in Belfast. And so when I was then asked by, there was one person I did know who ran he produced Toad of Toad Hall every year in London at the Comedy Theatre, and he asked me to be in it. And Equity at that time, you couldn't become a member of Equity without having a job, but on the other hand, you also couldn't immediately start in the West End. You had to start somewhere else. You had to have had something like 40 weeks professional experience before you could be a full-time Equity member. So that meant you had to do, you had to pay your dues out in the sticks for at least 40 weeks. That's 40 weeks working, not just, 40 weeks. And I went to Equity. I said, look, I've been asked to do this West End. Oh, no, you can't do that. I said, well, I've just done a job in Belfast. And they said, oh, well, how much were you paid? And I said, 150 quid. Oh, well, then you're a professional actor. That's it. They gave me a full card straight away. So I was able to go and understudy Toad of Toad Hall and play the back legs of the horse, Alfred the horse, and Fat Face the policeman. And I heard later that somebody said that there had been a meeting of the academics in my course, my economics course, going over what the graduates were doing and so forth. And so we said, what's Constantine up to? And they said, well, I heard he was playing the back legs of a horse. Ah, yes, well, that would be Constantine. And that was my start. A traditional start, back legs of a horse.
And we've been in quite a few West End productions, I take it, over over your career. Do you have particular favourites and maybe particular theatres that are particularly fond of working at?
I loved working at the Royal Court. That was just wonderful. As I say, I like small. I also worked at what is now called the Kiln. It used to be called the Tricycle in North London. That was lovely. And I worked on other little off West End stages, which I just love doing that. But there is a problem in that whole period of my life when, work wasn't that frequent. To do theatre that you really want to do, which in my case was new plays and experimental work and that kind of thing, you had to give up quite a lot of time, maybe 2 or 3 weeks rehearsal, a couple of weeks playing for no money. And I couldn't afford that. I had to be available at least for a job that paid. I had a family and so forth. So I did much less theatre than I would have liked. As it happened, I was at the Royal Shakespeare Company, and I did the usual. When I left, after I left university and did my Toad, I then on and off I also that summer went and played in Midsummer Night's Dream in Regent's Park in the open air theatre. Played a blue fairy and understudied the lead. And then it was 2 or 3 years of doing the provincial repertory theatres, which in those days, for example, I was at the Opera House in Harrogate, where you did a play for 2 weeks, and then you did another play for 2 weeks. So while you were performing your 2 weeks, you were rehearsing the next play. And that was just, this constant change. But it was a brilliant, brilliant training, if you like.
Yeah.
And I was at the Liverpool Everyman, which of course was a very significant theatre at the time. But what happened to me was that I speak Russian, and that got me into films very early in my career. A lot of people, English actors at that time, didn't get into film making for a long time. unless there was some complete chance. So I got in very early because at that time it was kind of Cold War. There were lots of Russian baddies to be played and so on and so forth. And one with one thing and another, I got into the good books of a couple of casting directors who cast films and television productions that were being made abroad. And there were a number of us. It was almost like a group. There were maybe 150 actors, something like that, who did a lot of work in foreign countries, doing these co-productions, these international films and so forth. And I was lucky enough to be sort of part of that fairly frequently employed bunch who went to, I don't know, Morocco was quite common, and of course the then Yugoslavia. A lot of filming happened in Yugoslavia at the time. So yes, that was a great piece of luck. But I have to say, my very, very first appearance on film was while I was still at university, and there was a film being shot there using the university, using Dublin as a location. And it was with Laurence Olivier and the then very young Sarah Miles and Terence Stamp's first film. And it was called Term of Trial. And it was quite a scandalous film. It was about this teacher who falls in love with his very young pupil. Simone Signoret played his wife. And there's a scene in which it's a kind of montage scene where he's going through the city and he is appalled by what is happening to youth today, the degradation and how immoral everything is. And at one point he passes by these boys, young men, looking in a bookshop window, and they're ogling what were then the only kind of rude magazines you get, which were health and efficiency and so forth. There were these naturist magazines. They were ogling this, and he's terribly shocked. And then he passes by a milk bar. We used to have milk bars. They weren't coffee bars. They were kind of milk bars where you had different flavors, milk and so forth. And he sees this group of young people dancing the twist. And one of them has a cigarette dangling out of his mouth, and he's dancing the twist. This pretty girl. That was me. And he is so shocked by this terrible degradation of youth, giant twisting in a milk bar. So that was my very first appearance on film. And so I was very shocking.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a lovely way to begin, isn't it? Did you always want to go into TV and film, or did you originally see yourself as a stage actor?
Sorry, say again.
Did you always want to go into film and TV, or did
I
you?
did actually. I really was attracted to film, and I consider myself incredibly lucky because the way things have happened to me, a lot of my career has been spent behind the camera as a dialogue coach. And I've loved that. As a dialogue coach, maybe we'll talk about what that means and how I came about it at some point. But you're the only person apart from the director who deals directly with the actors. You're involved in the film from before it starts filming to after it's finished filming, because you're in pre-production, post-production. So you see the whole thing. As an actor, even if you're the lead, you'll spend your time on it filming, but that's all. And most actors are only on a film because of the way they structure the schedule. You might be on it for 2 weeks or whatever. And I remember also being, a small part player. I would get on a film and it was so exciting, and I just loved being on set. But you feel you're getting on a moving train, and you're on it for a couple of days, a week, 2 weeks, and then you have to get off, and the train moves on, and the wonderful crew you've got to know has moved on. And that was always a kind of sad sad thing.
Mm.
But funnily enough, I wanted to do economics in order to be a merchant banker, because I thought what I really wanted to do was travel, and merchant bankers traveled in those days. And of course, as it happened, most of my professional life was spent traveling all over the world, which makes me very happy.
Do you have a favorite place that you worked in? Favorite country?
I'm sorry?
Do you have a favorite country that you worked in?
Oh gosh, they're all wonderful, actually, even the small films. I think, well, the one that kind of professionally put me on the map was a film called The Last Emperor, which, I don't know if you know it, it was a film directed by Bernardo Bertolucci, and it was the first Western film to be made in China.
Yeah.
Which was in about 1986. And it was a huge, huge, huge success. It got, I don't know, 10 or 11 Oscars. It was a major, major commercial success. But it was also, on several levels, it was so exciting. First of all, being in China, I was in China for maybe 3-4 months. And then we filmed in Italy as well. And China at that time, this is, I say, about 1986, there were hardly any cars, for instance, in Beijing. I mean, now you see pictures of Beijing, there's amazing skyscrapers and traffic jams. There was none of that. There were 3 international hotels. I think it was a Holiday Inn and a Sheraton and something else. And in fact, I stayed in the big Chinese hotel, the Beijing Hotel, which had something like, I don't know, 700 rooms. That's a huge, huge hotel, which had been built in, I think, the previous century by the French. And it was a very strange time in China. In fact, the food was terrible because they didn't have the ingredients, really, but also cooking was a bourgeois pursuit, and it was rather frowned on, cooking. And I worked with these wonderful, well, the lead was Peter O'Toole, and he was a lovely, lovely man. And I worked with all these Chinese actors. And what made my works particularly interesting for me was that the actors all came from different parts of the world. They were ethnically, as it were, Chinese. Some were American, some were English, some were from Hong Kong, some were from China itself, the smaller parts. And I had to find a way of unifying the way they spoke.
Yeah.
So because the nature of the film is that they're all in the same society, you know, and so obviously they speak the same. So I had to find a way that a manner of speech in English that they could all manage. And so I did that by just having, say, 3 or 4 sounds that they could all do. And that unified the way they spoke. And that became the key, because I sort of just thought this up on the hop, to the way I worked on almost every film after that, because I became known for working with foreign actors who needed to act in English. They didn't have to sound English. They needed to be able to act well in a language that wasn't their own. And that is a huge challenge for an actor, probably the most difficult thing they can do. So yes, that was such a thrill. And some of the older actors I worked with who were not professional actors, they had been journalists or teachers, or but they were able to speak a little English. And of course, they had all suffered in the Cultural Revolution. They'd been out, you know, on labor camps and split up from their families. I mean, it was quite dramatic, quite dramatic. But also one of the things that hit me in that film and in almost every movie since was what I call the pinch me moments. The moments you can't believe that you're actually there. And to go into the Forbidden City, this amazing, huge, walled palace in the middle of Beijing, and to go in there in the early morning, because it's a big tourist attraction, before the tourists come, so it's completely empty, just the crows flying around. And then to be there in the evening after it's closed. It was kind of magical. And we used, a lot of it was being restored and rebuilt, so that the tourists weren't there. And those were the parts of the city that we used. And I remember sitting on a roof. There's a scene where the young emperor, the teenage emperor, decides to go up on the roof. He's going to throw himself off and so forth. And his teacher, Peter O'Toole, has to rescue him. And I'm up there sitting on the roof while we're setting things up. And they have these wonderful glazed tiles. And I'm sitting on the roof and I think to myself, the last person who had the view I now have was the man who put the tiles on the roof. And that was, hundreds of years ago. And it was amazing. Oi, stop it. Sorry, my dog. So yes, and I've had so many remarkable. Another remarkable moment was in the middle of the Forbidden City, there was a theatre, and it was built very much like the Globe. It was an open courtyard with galleries around 3 parts, and then the stage itself was galleried. And so the nobles would be in the galleries, and the kind of common people, well, not the common people, the lesser nobles, if you like, were in the courtyard. And we used that for 3 extraordinarily balmy nights. And we had the Peking Opera, which is an extraordinary form of theatre. And we had the Peking Opera performing. And of course, the whole theatre was filled with people in costume of the period. And I'm sitting there by the sound people in my hidden away in a corner, just watching and feeling this was what the theatre was like. This was actually, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, this is how it really was. Amazing.
Oh yeah.
So a life full of wonderful experiences.
Oh, yeah, very much so. I wanted to sort of go back to your beginnings really with some of your early TV work. I don't know if you remember a TV series called The Informer with Ian Hendry. Do you remember?
I do indeed. And Hendry was a fascinating actor. He was really, really very, it was a very fine actor indeed. And we, in fact, I also did a movie with him called, it escapes me now, in which it was a prison camp movie, but the prisoners, war prisoners, but the prisoners were German. It was set in Scotland. It was based on a reality. The Mackenzie Break, it was called. And it was, the prisoners were German, the guards were English, but they were people who were not able to go to war. So they were teachers, they were invalids of some kind, whereas the prisoners were very macho, gung-ho. They were in fact mostly Navy people, I think. And Ian was in charge. He was the camp commander. No, wasn't the camp commander. camp commander was Brian Keith, or Brian Keith was brought in to control the camp, which wasn't going very, very well under Ian. And yes, we had a terrific time together. Sadly, alcohol played a big part in his life.
Yes.
And yeah, no, he was a wonderful actor. Wonderful.
Oh yeah, yeah. And everybody I spoke to that has worked with him says the same. I mean, he had his troubles, but was obviously a great professional. You also did an episode of Man in the Suitcase called.
Before you go, did you ever see one of my favourite British films, The Hill? Do you know The Hill?
I've
Sean Connery.
Yes, I have seen.
And Ian, you must look it up.
Yeah.
It's a very, very good film indeed. And Ian is just brilliant in it. Plays this really bastard sergeant bully. And he is so good. Anyway, carry on. Sorry, I interrupted. You've seen The Hill.
I must have familiarised myself with that one. I was talking about Man in the Suitcase. It was an episode called Blind Spot. Do you remember Man in the Suitcase?
I do. That was really my first TV. It was out at ATV Studios in Elstree, and I was a huge fan of Richard Bradford's because I loved a film called The Chase. Do you know that film? The Chase was a film with Marlon Brando and Richard Bradford, and the first film that Robert Redford did. He was a young actor in it, and that's another film I recommend you watch. The Chase, and Bradford is such a bastard in it. But so I was kind of hero worshipping him in my little scene, which I enjoyed doing. That was great.
Because of course you weren't credited in the early days as Gregory, were you? You had
no. I then in those days my real name is Constantine de Gogel, which is an old French name, and I realized at some point, I mean, I was often being cast as foreigners because I was very good at accents and so forth. And but often Russians, sometimes French. Well, I did play Spaniards and Germans and so forth. But I realized that you can have very strange names and it doesn't matter. But certain names will conjure up an image. I mean, if you're called Sean O'Casey, you expect the guy to be red-haired and freckled, and there's a sort of certain expectation. And I think the name I was born with, there was an expectation of some kind of foreign, maybe aristocratic, whatever, and I speak like this and I look like a truck driver, so my name didn't really match, and I thought that was hindering me from getting, although I had played English parts quite a few times, but I thought it was hindering me, so I changed it, and it did work. I immediately started getting more English parts, and it stuck. I just picked it out of a hat. There was no particular, I wanted to keep the Constantine, because that's distinctive, but I wanted just a more neutral surname.
I think it's quite a common thing for actors to do that. Do you remember the director of Man in the Suitcase, a gentleman called Jeremy Summers?
I don't at all, actually. I mean, that was so long ago that forgive me, I'm just having. No, I don't. I don't at all.
He was just one of those veteran directors that had done lots of being The Protectors, quite an extensive TV directing background.
I'm sure.
We had a question come in. It was quite a good question. What do you think about the feeling nowadays that English people should not play foreign parts? The idea you have to be German, French.
Oh, that's such a tricky one. And I don't know the answer, in that an actor is an actor. Now, I know that it's good to have a disabled person play a disabled character. It's good to have a gay person play a gay character. That's fine. I think the point is not to, it's to allow, say, a disabled person or ethnic minority people to play those parts. But I don't see any reason why an actor shouldn't play any part that they choose him for if he capable of it. That's what we do. That's our art. That's our craft. I mean, the argument is you don't have to be a murderer to play a murderer. You know what I mean? It's very tricky, and I hesitate to make any real judgment on that. And I like colorblind casting, I all of that, but sometimes it can be ridiculous. I mean, there are a lot of productions now where a woman is playing a traditionally male role and so forth, and it can work. I'm not saying it doesn't, but I don't know. I'm bumbling a bit on that one.
Yeah, I mean, what I thought was quite interesting, I saw Ian McKellen's Hamlet.
Did you?
Recently, and of course, a man of his 80 playing, a student, and Polonius was played by a female Frances Barber played Polonius, and there was lots of gender blind, color blind, and I thought it was a very good way to do it. And
did it work for you? Did his Hamlet work?
Yeah, I thought it was fantastic. He had he was very energetic on stage, and lots of running about and up gantries and all sorts of things. So he kept the energy of a younger man. But as you say, Ian McKellen did say in interviews, because they were saying, well, aren't you a bit old to play Hamlet? And he said, well, I played Gandalf in the Lord of the Rings films, and I'm about 1,000 years too young for that, but nobody objected at the time. So I think it's a good point that an actor should be able to play anything, because of course that's the job of an actor, isn't it? So
yes, except if a part is specifically written as a young student.
It's
odd to have an 80-year-old man play him. And he is, he's revenging his father's death and so forth. But, there you go.
It doesn't make sense.
I mean, I'm open to it. I love experimental theatre. I love. I mean, one of the most brilliant pieces of theatre I've seen. Well, there are maybe 5 life-changing pieces of theatre I've seen, and one of them was recent. Was the Cyrano de Bergerac with James McAvoy.
Right.
And the way they did it, the style of it, the conventions they used, the acting, and it was just mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. That was, in fact, I originally saw it as one of the, I don't live in London anymore, so I saw it as a broadcast play.
Right, yeah.
And I was knocked out by it. And then when the opportunity, then it went away, there was COVID and so forth, and they revived it in London quite recently, a couple of months ago. And I was lucky enough to get tickets. And now they've gone to New York, but it does exist on film. And I think possibly when they finish their tour, it may be back again on Sky Arts and so forth. It was a National Theatre live thing on Sky Arts. I urge you to see it if it does come back. It's just extraordinary, quite extraordinary.
Yeah, it was on my list of things to see, but unfortunately I just couldn't make the dates work, sadly. But I would have liked to have seen that. The other thing that springs to mind was The Elephant Man with Bradley Cooper a few years ago, and that was
Oh, did you?
and no makeup or anything. And of course, he's mostly one of the handsomest
Oh,
actors.
yes, yes.
And he starts to play with his top off, and the doctor who looked after John Merrick describes his condition, and Bradley changes his posture, his hands, all sorts of things to take it on. And within 5 minutes, you completely buy that he is this person, you know, and
there are no prosthetics, no makeup, no
that's it,
face.
nothing at all. It is
Wow.
remarkable. Yeah, that was very good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it just shows, you know, that I mean, actually, now that you mention it, I've just seen an astonishing production called Jerusalem with.
Oh, yes. I want to get tickets to that if I can.
Oh, yeah. Please do.
Yeah.
Please do, because what? Oh God, the name has gone.
Mark Rylance.
Mark Rylance.
Yeah.
One knows Mark Rylance as a very, very still actor.
Mm.
One of his remarkable qualities is that he's so still and you're just drawn, he's magnetic.
Mm.
In this play, he's so physical. He plays a character who was a motorcycle daredevil stuntman and has a broken body. And the way he moves, the way he uses his body. Mm. And there's one point, you mentioned taking his top off. At one point, he's got his top off and he's standing kind of, well, trying to be erect. But in fact, he stands like a deformed, his back is deformed in some way. Mm. I mean, it's amazing. It's just, and for Mark Rylance, you don't expect that somehow. No. It's genius acting, genius. Yeah. And a very, very good play. The writing is wonderful. Jez Butterworth play. And do get tickets if you possibly can. Quite a short run, I think.
I have seen Mark on stage a couple of times, and Twelfth Night and Fernelli and the King. I think he played a couple of years ago. So yeah, he's one of the best, I think, of his generation, really.
Yeah.
We had another question. Patrick Troughton often played parts with foreign accents. Did you ever encounter Patrick Troughton in anything?
I didn't. No, I never met Troughton, as far as I can remember. No, I don't think I did. No, is the answer.
Okay. And I wanted to mention you did a film called Before Winter Comes, and that had
yes. Now, Before Winter Comes is probably it was one of my very early major films. And that was, I was just thinking, because I made a few notes, because I forget names and things on the hoof, as you've just seen. I made notes of things, and I realized how many films I've made with people who, when it's their first film. And Before Winter Comes was John Hurt's first film.
Yeah.
And it was a remarkable film in lots of ways. It starred someone called David Niven, who was a great, great film star. He himself would say he wasn't a great actor. He just, you know, he had so much charm. He was just brilliant. Now, he had an extraordinary quality, which quite a few leading actors at the time had. They treated their position as a leading actor rather like a team captain, and they would keep their ear open. You know, they know what was going on, and if anything was going on set that was not as it should be, or someone was being badly treated, they would take it up and go to the producer and say, look, I think you should look into this. You don't do what's going on, so on and so forth. You don't get that now, or not in my experience. Very rarely happens.
Yeah.
Happened once on a film with Jessica Lange. We had a very, very long day, and the extras hadn't been fed. This was in Rome. And Jessica Lange wouldn't do a third take, so I'm not going to do another take until you feed the extras. And of course, it was done within half an hour. Everyone is fed. But no, David Niven was quite extraordinary.
Hmm.
And in fact, I worked on 3 movies with him. He had a scene with John Hurt. And John Hurt was very, very nervous. And it was just the 2 of them.
Hmm.
And Niven, of course, was this very experienced international star. John Hurt was this novice. But the scene was John Hurt's scene, and he had the dialogue. And take 1, Niven missed his mark. Take 2, Niven fluffed one of his lines. Take 3, Niven had an aeroplane. Take 4, Niven put his prop down at the wrong time.
Hmm.
He did 13 takes until Hurt got it right.
Hmm. Wow.
Amazing, 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 amazing.
Yeah.
There was another instance on that film, which was we filmed up in the Alps, in the Austrian Alps.
Hmm.
And it was winter and it was cold and it was snowy and so forth. And it was an almost entirely male cast. But Anna Karina was due to come to the film, to the set. She was Godard's wife and a very well-known French actress. And David Niven summoned the production manager. He said, I noticed that there isn't a caravan for Miss Karina. And they said, oh no, David, it's not in her contract. But don't you think she should have a caravan? We have caravans and it's very cold and it's all men. And I think she should have a caravan, don't you? And he said, oh, well, yes, I know, but it's not in her contract. So we'll accommodate her in something else. I really do think she should have a caravan. I'll tell you what, why don't you put her name on my caravan and get another one for me tomorrow? So that's the kind of man he was.
Yeah.
And yes, that was fun, that film. Yeah.
Yeah, David Niven sounds wonderful, accommodating, and and one of those very giving actors. That's lovely.
Yes.
Another TV appearance of note was the series Department S with Peter Wingard.
With Peter Wingard, the famous Peter Wingard.
Yes.
The campest actor in Christendom. He was wonderful, Peter Wingard, because he was outrageous at a time when people weren't really outrageous. It wasn't really done.
No.
And he was so flamboyant. He was so camp, is really the word. He was wonderful. I worked with him again on a film of Mary, Queen of Scots. We were filming up in Scotland, or a television play. And he was one of the Scottish lords or something. And we were very pressed for time. We were behind schedule. It was very late in the evening. We had to get the shot in. And Mary, Queen of Scots dismisses Peter Wingard from, he has to leave. And unscripted, unrehearsed, he pulls out this big white handkerchief from his sleeve and does this huge flourishing bow, leaving the room. So there's nothing, you could only watch Peter Wingard, he wouldn't pay attention to anyone else. Yeah, he was very naughty and very lovely, and charming man.
Oh, wonderful. And I have to mention, there's a girl in my suit with Peter Sellers.
That was an extraordinary experience. Of course, Peter Sellers at that time was at the very height of his fame and fortune and all of that. And Goldie Hawn was, she was so wonderful. So we're filming this scene. For example, where we're doing a wine tasting. I'm playing the son of this owner of a vineyard, and it was actually, at the time I was thinking, the man who plays the owner of the vineyard, a supposedly very rich aristocratic man, was played by a very distinguished looking actor who lived in a bedsit in Paddington and didn't have two halfpennies to run together. And there was Peter Sellers, who was extremely rich. And it was just this contrast, what the actor is presenting on film and what the reality is, you know.
Yeah.
So we do this scene of wine tasting, and the gag is that you look at the wine and you smell it and you swirl it and you sip it and you spit. And the gag is that Goldie Hawn doesn't spit and she gets drunk. So the way it's set up, Sellers and Hawn are behind me, behind my shoulder. And we try and do this. So obviously they want to time it so that the looking and the swirling and the smelling and the tasting and the spitting is all at the same time. There's a rhythm to it. We're all doing the same thing, except Goldie Hawn.
Yeah.
So we did a couple of things, and it didn't really, we were on a little grass patch, and it didn't really work. And I said to the director, excuse me, I can't see them, so it's quite difficult for me to time it. You think it'd be possible for Mr. Sellers to take his timing from me? Oh, deadly silence. And he said, well, I'll ask him. We'll see. And, Peter, would you mind taking the timing from Constantine? Because you can see him, he can't see you. No, we'll try that. And it worked first time perfectly. Could we have Constantine, another line, another shot of Constantine? And I was suddenly in the director's good books, and because it went so well and everyone was so happy. And it was very simple, but it was just one of those things that worked well.
Yeah. We had a question come in because There's a Girl in My Soup started as a stage play.
Yes, it did.
Generally find that plays transfer to film well, or do you think that
I saw the stage play, funnily enough. I remember seeing it. I'm not knowing that I'd ever do a film. And yes, it did. I thought the film wasn't bad at all.
Yeah.
Sellers and Hawn were very good. Yeah.
Did you find that Sellers was a bit unpredictable at times, or fairly sort of?
No, he behaved well on this film.
Yeah.
Talking about behavior, I'm often asked about people's behavior on set and so forth. And I believe, and I've worked with people who have behaved badly, directors and actors and so forth. But actually, I believe that they're not bad people, they're insecure.
Yeah.
Actors, directors are very insecure people. I mean, I don't know a director who doesn't come to the first day of filming thinking he's going to be found out. I mean, the imposter syndrome is very strong in directors and indeed in actors.
Yeah.
And I won't say who it was, but a major star I worked with behaved very, very badly on one film. And had every reason to. The script kept changing every day. It was full of technical jargon. She wasn't getting on with the co-star. There was a lot of pressure on this particular film to succeed. It was the first film of a major new studio. And she was a nightmare, really. And then a couple of years later, I worked with her again, or I was going to work with her again. And I thought, oh my God, this is going to be so difficult. And that turned out to be one of the happiest experiences of my life. And she was one of the boys. She was just terrific. And she was happy. You know, it was as simple as that. So there wasn't all these terrible pressures on her. And and I've worked with, the other thing is I've worked with actors who have terrible reputations. I mean, George C. Scott had a dreadful reputation. There was this rumor that somebody had stood on his mark,
yes,
and he hit him. Now, whether that was true or not, I don't know, but there was this baggage of a very fierce reputation. And my first dialogue coaching job was on a film about Mussolini with George C. Scott, rather unlikely, playing Mussolini. And Lee Grant was his wife. And Lee Grant had a serious case of Peter Panism. She wanted to be young. Right. She flirted with the crew. She went out partying. She was then in her, I don't know, must have been at least in her 50s, probably 60s, and sort of behaved like a 20-year-old. It was very strange. Right. And she was always late on set, always late to the set. And the first thing, my first experience of George C. Scott was, because it was Mussolini, what they wanted me to do was to make sure everyone had a slight Italian accent.
Yeah.
All right, so we're filming in Yugoslavia. We're based in Zagreb, and I see Scott in the bar of the hotel, second night or so, go up to us, excuse me, Mr. Scott, my name's Constantine, I'm the dialogue coach, and I just wondered how much of an Italian accent you plan to do, because I'll use you as the model, and what you do, I'll make everyone else do. I ain't talking no fucking Italian accent. Very good. So I go off to the producers, and they said, yes, we know. And so everyone had to have an American accent, and there were a lot of British. In those days, you would have American stars, probably the leading actors, all the supporting actors would be British, and then the small parts would be local. So I had a big job. That was my first job, and I absolutely loved it. Anyway, we come to a day where there's a small set, and it's a very difficult scene, and it's just George and Lee Grant, and he's waiting for her, and waiting for her, and getting more and more antsy. Finally, she comes on set. Oh, and she comes on all girly and twittery, because in fact, she's playing them when they are younger. So she loves this, and she's all twitter, twitter, twitter. The sound man, George has quite a big piece of dialogue. He was one of the actors who never dropped a stitch in dialogue. Amazing, amazing ability to be word perfect all the time. Sound man says to me, he's saying the word senor in the Spanish way, not in the Italian way. I think you should tell him. And I said, no, I don't think so, George. Not now. It was very tense. And so they do it again. He's done it again. I think you should tell him. No, George, really, things are very tense. I don't think it's a good idea. In those days, we didn't have kind of radio. We couldn't be distant. We were actually in the room, hiding behind furniture with headphones and so forth. So another day, he did it again. If you don't tell him, I will. All right, George. So I go up. Excuse me, Mr. Scott. Yeah. You're pronouncing the word signor in the Spanish fashion. In fact, it should be Italian. Get the fuck out of my sight, you cocksucker! He just exploded. The whole set lit up. And the AD came up to me and said, Constantine, I think you should take the day off. So I took the day off, needless to say. And the next day, or a day or two later, I think it was the next day, there was a scene outside, an exterior, on a big field, which was supposed to be an airfield. And Mussolini's son has just been killed in an air crash.
Yeah. And
I'm sitting there by the camera, by the sound people. I'm sitting there doing my thing, and I see Scott approaching from the distance. And he's getting nearer and nearer and nearer. And I think I think I'm probably going to have to get the next plane home. So he comes up to me, and I get up and I say, "Good morning, George." And he just hugs me in this huge bear hug. He says, "Constantine, I am so sorry. You were being professional and I wasn't. I am so sorry. Please forgive me. Please forgive me." And he was just wonderful from then on. He was just a sweetheart. So yeah, that's my George C. Scott story.
Do you find that nowadays, or as you know, we've got more to modern times, that you didn't really have, let's say, those volatile times on set, or is it always by nature of filmmaking very high pressure, and sometimes you have, or is the industry kind of improved?
I don't think they've really changed much. As I say, I think what has changed is the nature of the leading actors take a certain responsibility. I think that's changed. It's always been pressured. The fascinating thing about Western filmmaking is that the most expensive element of making a movie is time. And I've made quite a few films in Eastern Bloc countries where the cheapest element is time. The most expensive element was film stock and developing materials. So you couldn't do 2 takes, 3 takes. You couldn't, well, you might do 2, but you couldn't do more. But actors would be engaged for months. They didn't cost anything.
Right.
Locations didn't cost them. Nothing cost them. It all belonged to the state or whatever. They didn't care. Time was not important. But yes, time is very important in Western filmmaking. So that is why people try to be professional. Why? I mean, what I love about film, God, I'm beginning to really bang on, aren't I? What I love about filmmaking is and particularly in earlier days, now we have the internet and all communication. Before that, if you're on location, you were isolated, essentially. I mean, of course, you could telephone home, and which was very expensive, or you know, that you could. There were faxes, perhaps, but essentially, you didn't really have much contact with the outside world. You would see the news on your hotel television, perhaps, but if it was in Chinese or whatever, you didn't really mean anything. And what happened was you had this community, this bubble of people who are very specifically employed, whether they are the star or the carpenter. They're employed because they're really good at their job. And the carpenter is an expert carpenter, the painter is an expert painter, and so forth, whatever level they are. And the fascinating thing about filming too is the hierarchy. Everybody, what makes it work is that everybody has a very specific job. And if something goes wrong, you know exactly where it went wrong and who made it wrong. So that's very good. And so you've got this community that is self-feeding, self-paying. You're very well accommodated, you're very well fed, you're very well looked after from dawn to dusk. You don't have to think about anything except your job. You're taken care of from start to finish, and very comfortably and very well taken care of. And you form relationships very quickly. It's strange when actors get together. They're just sitting around talking. They immediately get on very intimate terms. And everybody on a film, their energies and their focus are into the middle, into the product. All their expertise, the energy is all focused into the middle to create whatever it is you're creating. And I found that very exciting and very, and when I first started, you form, as I said, these friendships, relationships, and you think, oh, well, this will go on and I'll keep in touch. You never do, very rarely.
Yeah.
But there is a sort of Freemasonry where it's quite traditional to be given T-shirts at the end of a shoot, a T-shirt with the logo of the film or whatever. And so 2 films down the road, you see people wearing a T-shirt from that film, or you see somebody wearing a T-shirt from another film, but a friend of yours was on it. So you say, oh, you worked on so-and-so, did you? Say, yeah. Do you know my friend Charlie? Oh, yeah. We went out every night. So yeah, it's this kind of extraordinary gypsy Freemasonry. We all know each other. It is strange. And looking at what the connections too of the films I've done, where, well, for example, one of the Bond connections I have is Eva Green. I did her first film, which was another Bertolucci film called The Dreamers.
Yeah.
And then, of course, she became a Bond lady.
How did you find working with her?
Oh, amazing! Particularly on that, it was extraordinary. She's quite eccentric,
yeah,
which is fascinating too. That's great. But then she was perhaps a little less eccentric because she was very young. She was, as I say, it was her first film. She was quite nervous about it all because she was the only girl. There were 3 characters, two boys and her, and she had to spend a lot of it naked. So yeah, and she wasn't used to being naked.
No.
So yeah, but no, she's great and she's a fine actress. Yeah, I say so many movies where I worked with people doing their first film, like Robert Downey Jr. was on Mussolini. That was his first movie, I think. Jonathan Pryce was on, his first movie was called A Voyage of the Damned. That was an amazing thing. Back in the day, Lou Grade, who was a producer on ATV, used to make these big multinational cast films, and he would claim to have more stars than there are in the sky. Well, this was one of them. Had Faye Dunaway and Max von Sydow and Malcolm McDowell and I mean, Orson Welles. I met Orson Welles. He was in the film. And Jonathan Pryce, it was his first movie.
Yeah.
And yes, that was I was a navigation officer, and Max von Sydow was the captain. So I had all my scenes with Max von Sydow on the bridge. What an amazing man! There was a wonderful actor.
Yeah.
So much class, so much dignity, and just a real gent. Yeah. And who else? Oh, Tom Hiddleston. His first film, which was something called Conspiracy. And who else? Yeah, I can't think of anyone else at the moment. But oh, Chiwetel Ejiofor. I did his first film.
Yeah.
He was about 18 at the time and wonderful. What an actor.
Yeah.
He's a really fine actor. Yeah, he was still at school, I think, when he did the film I was involved with.
Yeah. I think Jonathan Pryce is one of my favourite actors. And again, I've seen him, Jonathan Pryce.
Yes.
Is one of my favourite actors. And I've seen him
Oh, he's great. He is great. I mean, I think there are a few actors, only a handful, mind you, who have been hugely successful in almost all areas. If you think of McKellen or Pat Stewart, who is a really, I mean, they're really, really seriously fine theatre actors, as is Jonathan Pryce. And they're very good film actors, but they're also huge stars in a totally different genre. You know, they're known all over the world by they would never think that, you know, Pat Stewart played Macbeth, or I mean, he's one of my favorite actors. I happen to know him quite well, and I think he's just brilliant.
Oh yeah. I mean, I saw
The Waiting for Godot that he did with Ian McKellen is just one of the best productions of it I've ever seen.
I didn't get a chance to see that one, but I saw Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart in No Man's Land, and that
wasn't that wonderful?
That was excellent.
Wasn't that great?
Yeah.
I saw that originally with Gielgud and Ralph Richardson.
Oh wow.
That was the first, when it first came out. That was the first production was Gielgud and Richardson, and they were wonderful too. But no, I saw that No Man's Land.
Yeah.
Yes, so good. So, but they love working together. They're such close friends.
Yes.
Because of course they've done the X-Men things together too, and they've done those, you know, blockbuster movies together, and they just have a laugh. They're just teasing each other all the time.
Yeah, you can see that on stage, can't you? Sort of just cracking out occasionally, and the affection they have. And I saw Patrick Stewart do a one-man version of A Christmas Carol where he played all the, you know, all the parts, and Ian McKellen in did Macbeth. So, you know, definitely some of the best actors on stage and screen. Jonathan Pryce I've seen in Merchant of Venice and at the Globe, and a couple of other things as well. So you mentioned Orson Welles. Did he live up to his reputation?
Well, he was lovely. I mean, the thing was that Orson Welles was a kind of tart, because he was going all over the place, trying, you know, doing little bits and bobs and parts, and trying to earn some money for his own projects. I'm sure this was one of those instances, and I didn't get much chance to. He wasn't in any scenes that I was involved in, but we were filming in Barcelona, and the ship that we were using. This is another little anecdote. The ship that we were using was based in Barcelona. It was a Mediterranean cruise ship which we had booked for the period of the filming. Anyway, we'd arrived in Barcelona, and some of the guys and I were at a restaurant called Los Caracoles, and there in the corner was the great man reading a book. And we said, "Well, there's also that. We should go up and say hello." "Well, who's going to go?" "Constantine, you go." "Oh, I'm like, yes, you go. You go on. So I had to go. Said, "Excuse me, Mr. Well, the boys and I were in the same movie, and we just wanted to say hello." "Oh, hi. You picked a good restaurant. This is the best restaurant in Barcelona." That was it. That was my conversation with Orson Welles. But he was everything one. I'm such a fan. The Third Man for me is the best film ever made. And the reason I say it's the best film ever made is that, and I've seen it many, many times. Funnily enough, I had seen it so many times that when I saw it at the NFT in the cinema, I realized I had never seen it in the cinema before. I'd only seen it on television, and suddenly it was a whole different experience. So if you do get a chance, try and see The Third Man in the cinema.
Yeah, we'll do.
Every frame in that film advances the story, and every line in the film advances the story. There's no wastage, there's no fat, there's nothing. It is so pure, it is so clean. And that for me is the perfect movie.
Yeah. Something that must have been quite exciting was to be in Diamonds Are Forever, the James Bond film. How did that come about?
Which one, Diamonds Are Forever?
Diamonds Are Forever, yes. How did that?
I don't know, quite frankly. I mean, I was cast, obviously. I think my part was probably a little bit bigger than it ended up on the screen. And I ended up just in the background, but I spent quite a bit of time on set with Connery and Jill St. John, who was, I just fell in love. She was so drop dead gorgeous. so lovely too. I mean, really nice lady. I worked with Connery again on the Russia House.
Yeah.
With him and Michelle Pfeiffer, and he was great. I liked Connery. He was, I mean, he had a kind of gruff, distant sort of manner sometimes, but he was perfectly sociable and amenable, and just did what he does and got on with it. You know, no nonsense. He was a good man, Connery.
And I think you did encounter Jill. You did another film with Jill St. John? I think it was the Foreign Exchange, but whether you encountered her at that point or...
Oh, which film? Sorry.
Foreign Exchange.
Foreign Exchange.
Yeah, I mean, it might have been.
You've got me there.
Yeah, I'd have to double check exactly what year that was, but you're both on the cast. But
I certainly don't remember working with her.
I
may have been in the film, but
yeah,
I wouldn't necessarily have been in any scenes with her.
I was wondering whether you remember Joseph First, who played was in the scenes in Dance Forever with you. He played the mad scientist Metz in the film.
Metz, I remember Metz. Yes.
Yeah.
He was played by.
I've got him down as Joseph First.
Yes, Joseph. Yes, Joseph First. He was quite a well-known émigré actor in the UK, and he used to play those sort of parts. You know.
Yeah.
There was a group in those days. There was quite a group of émigré actors from Germany and Austria and so forth, who then would play villains. And again, it was the thing of Cold War films and also, war films. So they didn't do too badly. They got quite regular employment. Yes, I remember he was lovely.
He did a Patrick Troughton Doctor Who, and he had this. Well, of course, they always had cliffhangers, and he had this wonderful line that's very famous in Doctor Who history. It was "Nothing in the world can stop me now," and he's just a raving mad scientist. And it comes
That's great.
Catchphrase in Doctor Who. So,
that's great.
And do you remember Ed Bishop, who was also?
I knew Ed Bishop quite well. Yes, I mean we also did quite a bit of post-production sound together. I spent a lot of my professional life doing post-production sound. I got very interested in sound in general. And I don't know if you know what ADR is. It's it's what happens in post-production, where you put on the, as it were, what we call the oral effects. And I would direct a lot of that and get groups together and so forth. Very, as a part of the business I really like doing. And Ed Bishop, being an American actor, he would, okay, we needed Americans.
And because I've met a lot of actors like yourself, perhaps like the ADR process and looping your lines, etc. But I imagine for quite a few, it's quite a tedious part of the.
Well, it is. I mean, the thing is with ADR, you, as an actor, you often have to do yourself, because there's been some technical problem with the sound, or sometimes they slightly change the dialogue, or they want to add a bit of dialogue off screen that makes the scene clearer, that kind of thing. But what is fun is the crowd ADR. You see, what people who don't know film is that it's actually all illusion, and all of the sound is illusion. Sound is added on afterwards. So if you have a restaurant scene, what is really important is the dialogue between our principals. So you've got two people at a table, you've got to have their dialogue clear, no other sounds. And so in the background, all the other diners are miming. Doing that, and we put the sound on afterwards. And that's a lot of fun. And you can actually be very creative. And I would ask directors, I say, this scene, is it lunch or dinner? And I say, what do you mean? Well, the sound of a restaurant at lunchtime and dinner time are quite different. Oh, yes, I suppose so, yes. So, yes, that I love doing all that. And then one can put in the sounds off and that kind of thing, you know, like and in other rooms in the building or in other apartments, and create certain sounds.
Oh yeah, yeah. One film of note I wanted to mention was Inside Out with Telly Savalas,
Oh
Robert
yes,
Mason. Is that any memories of that one?
that was fantastic experience. Well, James Mason, Telly Savalas. At that time, Telly Savalas was probably one of the biggest stars in the world. He was known all over the world for Kojak.
Yeah.
And everywhere he went, he was mobbed, and he was incredibly patient. He was so good. And he was, one thing that was remarkable about his fame was that women of all ages were his fans. There were 20-year-olds and 80-year-olds, didn't matter. They all adored him. And he was so good with all of them. And he was patient, he'd have photographs taken, autographs signed, and so forth. And I was really impressed. I thought, this is amazing. And we had James Mason, of course, who was such a huge English star, and Robert Culp, who was really a very big American star as well, and me. And we were a gang trying to do the naughty, steal this gold, and because I was a Russian officer, the gold was actually in the Russian part of Berlin, and so they incorporated me into the gang, and then I tried to double cross them. That didn't work out too well, but that was fun to do. That was really fun to do. And I had to, at that time, Berlin was still divided. And I did go across the wall. I did look into East Germany, East Berlin. There were times when I had to go to the set in uniform in a car. And there I was in this full Russian colonel uniform. And people stared, and even the crew. I'd come on set in uniform, the crew were very uncomfortable. They didn't like it at all. It was very, very strong feelings then.
Oh yeah, 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 certainly, yeah. I have to mention to the devil a daughter. That's
Oh well, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
That was a film in which Nastasia Kinski was too young to watch the film.
Yeah.
The film in which she acted, she was too young to watch it.
Yeah.
And I had such fun. There was an actor in it called Denham Elliott, who I worked with on a couple of occasions, who's very naughty and very, very funny. And he and I can't remember who we were, but we were part of this cult, or whatever it was. And I remember at one point we were in these kind of gowns, these white robes, but no, they were gowns, not robes. And we were waiting to go on set. And we looked at each other. We thought, we look so ridiculous. And this is what actors do. We get into a dressing up box and we do ridiculous things and paint our nose. And we just started to laugh, and they had to stop the filming so that we could control ourselves again before we went on set. I worked with him again on another film in Canada called Russian Roulette with Gordon Jackson and Nigel Stock. And Nigel Stock was another of those doyens of British film. And the three of them knew each other very well. And they would tease each other and laugh and giggle and silly, silly jokes on set. The American actors, there was George Siegel and various other supporting actors, who were all very serious, you know. And they couldn't understand these three grown men giggling like schoolboys. And then it's action, and they're in it. Cut, giggle, 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 fart, 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 ha, ha, ha. And it just baffled the Americans, just baffled them. The other thing that was remarkable in that film, the leading lady was a young woman, and the director asked me to kind of help her because she wasn't really acting very well. But she had done something just prior to this film that had created a great sensation. That's why she was cast. And so I chatted with her and I said, tell me what theatre have you done before this? And she said, oh, I've never done any theatre. In fact, I've never been inside a theatre. I've never seen theatre. I thought, well, yeah. I know it sounds kind of old-fashioned, but American directors love English actors. They absolutely love them. And I've heard a director several times say, oh, thank God, another English actor coming on. And it is something to do with the theatre background.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying American actors aren't wonderful film actors. They are, of course. But yeah, it does carry a lot of weight somehow.
Well, very famously, Alan Rickman and Die Hard, and lots of British actors playing, in these huge Hollywood films. So very much always requested all the time. Did you?
What I think is very interesting is now how many Black English actors are doing well in America, where you'd think it would be very hard for them, but it's not. They seem to be really flourishing.
Oh yeah. I think there's perhaps something about the mystique and the, as you say, the training in the background, and of course, obviously Americans have Broadway, but I think the West End still leads the way in theatre. I've just said. Did you encounter Christopher Lee?
Christopher Lee was in To the Devil a Daughter.
Yeah.
He was also in another movie I made. Well, of course, he was very much Christopher Lee, put this way.
Yeah.
Great man for anecdotes. He, I hate to criticize, but he took himself very seriously. Put it that way. Yeah. I don't know. I always think that it's a kind of sin for an actor to take themselves seriously, because take your work seriously by all means, but you can't possibly take yourself seriously if what you do is put red noses on and silly frocks.
Well, of course, he was playing a lot of Dracula and that kind
of,
so
yes, all very serious.
Yeah. So despite being fairly sort of, more the, he's not playing Hamlet, is he? He's playing, something that's quite human.
I know.
Taking himself quite seriously.
Yeah.
And of course, Bond came calling again with Goldeneye. Was again that just a coincidence that you had those two appearances?
That's what, just one of those things. And that was fun. That was another first time. That was Alan Cummings' first movie, I think.
Oh yeah, I think it was
certainly the one that brought him to attention.
Yeah.
And I worked again with him on Titus. What a good actor he is.
Yeah. So again, I imagine the Russian accent was obviously the
yes. Well, I mean, I still now get called to do Russian parts. Again, because I speak Russian, or I can do a Russian accent or whatever it is. Yeah. So I still do that, or American, funnily enough.
Because I think you when we spoke last, you were saying that you worked with Martin Campbell, and he was quite interested in you doing like
yes. He did something very unusual. I hadn't come across it before. I was called by the casting director to go to Pinewood to read the script with some other actors who were cast, I think, already. I'm not sure. And Campbell wanted to hear, he just hear the dialogue, hear how it worked. Fair enough. So, but then he said to me, could I read the stage directions? So I said, okay, and I'm quite a good sight reader. So I read the stage direction, then I started to read them as if I were editing the film. And, you know, meanwhile, Bond is running along here, and at the same time, da, da, da. So I just read through it like that. And that all worked very well. And we had lunch. Then he said, well, we'll actually do it again. And this time we're recording it. Because then I'll have the sound recorders from the film, if I recorded it. And then I'll be able to listen to it all. And that was it. That was a very interesting thing to do. As I said, I haven't come across that. So he could then get a sense of the rhythm, I think, of the piece, because it's like writers say, they have no idea what they've written until it's come to life, you know. So yeah, that was interesting. That was interesting.
Yeah, because Goldeneye was a film that, from a script point of view, had a lot of writers, and it changed.
Yeah.
And so they say that's probably, you know, Martin checking things and wanting to, with a. I mean, did you, in your career, have you done a lot of table reads with casts and things? And is that do you find that sort of thing very, very helpful?
Have I done what? Sorry.
Lots of table reads, but you know, where you read the script.
Some do, some don't. It varies so much. There are directors who like to rehearse.
Yeah.
You get more. I'd say you get more on television. You do table reads and rehearsal more than on film. Again, it's a time thing as much as anything else.
Yeah.
Unless you're the main, I mean, on Trance, which Danny Boyle directed with James McAvoy and Vincent Cassel and Rosario Dawson. Oh, Rosario Dawson. Oh. And that we had table reading, we had rehearsal, but then it was quite a small cast. It was a pretty contained film. I think you can afford to do it more when it's just a small cast. Yeah, we had table readings and rehearsal, but I don't know if Boyle does that normally, but he did on that occasion.
Yeah, because Danny Boyle at one point was going to direct the last Daniel Craig Bond film. Having worked with Danny Boyle, do you think he would be a good fit for something, a franchise film, or is he perhaps?
I have no idea. I mean, I think Boyle is so much his own man.
Yeah.
And all the better for it. I mean, I think Boyle's amazing. And he's a total delight to work with.
Yeah.
He really cares. That's the thing. He cares about actors. He cares, and he welcomes input. Yeah, he's wonderful to be with. And I've never seen anyone so energetic on set. He's never still.
Yeah.
Walking around and talking. He's always moving, always, never sits down. Even between takes. So if it's between, he might go off the set and do whatever he needs to do. He never sits down. Extraordinary.
Last question on Goldeneye. Your scenes were shared with Isabella Scorupco. Do you remember working with Isabella?
I mean, other than chatting with her while we were waiting for, you know, lights or whatever, things to happen.
Yeah.
Lovely. But I can't say more than that. Then she was a lovely lady.
Oh, good. Wonderful. I want to just touch on briefly, because you've done a lot of voice work, so and also reading audiobooks, that sort of thing. How's that? Do you find that as a discipline?
What? How do I find what as a discipline?
Well, sort of doing audiobooks or say voiceover acting, that sort of thing.
Well, it's so different. It's tough. It's quite tough. The concentration can be exhausting. I mean, I've done these major Dostoevsky novels, which are quite difficult to do. In that, for one thing, they were written originally rather like Dickens. They were written as weekly kind of, or they were serialized.
Yeah.
And so the way they're structured is a bit different to a normal modern novel. And of course they're Russian, so that the moods and emotions change, and you can have a scene starting with a character who's euphoric and in love and the world is wonderful, and by the end of the scene he wants to kill himself. And you have to somehow encompass that in the reading.
Yeah.
And these very eccentric characters, and give them some sort of voice and character and all of that. But it's a great challenge. It's great to do. Yeah.
And you've done lots of commercials and things like that, because again, you've got.
I haven't done many commercials. I'm currently, like so many actors, in lockdown. They started getting their own home studio equipment, and I've done that. And I do online ads and promotions, and something called e-learning, you know, where you're instructing medical people or whatever it is, you know, it goes with animations. Yeah, so that's happening, and I'm a very, very happy fellow.
Yeah. How about things like audio dramas or radio plays? Is that something that's ever sort of?
You know, I did do some of it. Not very much. I did some dramas at the BBC, and I would love to do more radio drama. It just didn't happen. You know, you do sort of get classified in certain areas.
Yeah.
Somehow. And radio was never one of those areas that I got into. I have a lot of friends who've done years of radio work, but then that's been the main part of their activity, and they're known as radio actors.
Yeah.
That is wonderful. As somebody said, the great thing about radio drama is they have the best sets and the best costumes. As you can imagine, what they are.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of Doctor Who audio dramas that are.
Yes, there are. I know some of the people involved with that, but I've never been in the Doctor Who world, so I don't know.
It sounds like a no-brainer to me. It sounds like something you.
It escaped me somehow. I never got involved with I was never in a Doctor Who. So
as you say, there's no limit to the imagination. The costumes, the sets are perfect, of course, because you.
One of my very closest friends designed the Tom Baker scarf.
Oh wow! Yeah.
And he was a young designer at the BBC at the time, and he designed. I mean, he went on to win 3 Oscars and all sorts of brilliant things like Brazil. But yeah, he designed the Doctor Who scarf.
Yeah, it's a very nice claim to fame, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, it's a great, iconic prop.
Yeah, yes, it certainly is. And I think Tom Baker almost tripped over it on one or two occasions. If you watch.
Did he?
A couple of other films are just worth mentioning. Some of All Fears, the Tom Clancy.
Yes, that was a fun experience. We filmed that in Montreal, and I've never been to Montreal, and it was in the middle of winter, and the snow was 6 foot deep, and a lot of Montreal is actually underground because of that. So you can go shopping and go about your business, but you go on kind of passages under the streets.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with Montreal. Montreal is just wonderful. I was only there for 3 days, 4 days. And of course, the director's wife or partner was Carole King. And Carole King, of course, is so iconic in my generation as one of the greatest singer-songwriters. And she's wonderful. And she was sweet and lovely and funny. And yes, it was I did a scene with Kieran Hines, who's great. And I had a good time.
Wonderful.
Very good time. Another pinch me time. Here I am flying first class to Montreal.
And of course, Wonder Woman 1984, very
Wonder
recent.
Woman is quite recent, and that was a good experience in that it was very strange because nowadays they're so paranoid about what they're doing. When you're given a script, it's marked with your name and so on and so. You're not allowed to discuss it. You have to sign NDA agreements.
Yeah.
All of these things. Everything is so secretive. And when I went out, I didn't even know the name of the film.
Right.
It was called something quite different on all the material we had. Like I can't remember. It was called something like Veronica. I really can't remember what it's called. And you went out to Leavesden, and there it was, Veronica, makeup, costume, and then I discovered, going into the costume and seeing some of the costumes, that it was Wonder Woman.
Ah, right.
And I go for the costume fitting and makeup, so forth, and then I go out for it was only 1 day's filming, and I meet Patty Jenkins, who was absolutely delicious, fun and giggly, and my God, it must be such a huge undertaking to do a film like that, just logistically. You know, I'm so impressed, and she's great.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just the one scene, and you go on and do it. Thank you very much, and go home. And then back to your daytime life.
I mean, so much of cinema screens are dominated by these huge films, the Marvel, the DC films. Yeah. As an actor, do you find that frustrating because other films are being pushed away?
Yes, I mean, you could make 20 independent films for the price of a Marvel movie.
Oh, at least, yeah.
I'm not a great fan.
No.
I don't go to them. I appeared in a Michael Bay film called Six Underground.
Oh, yes.
And I remember watching it, or starting to watch it. And the first, it must have been 15 minutes. The stunt, it was stunt driving.
Yeah.
Amazing car chase that goes on and on and on and on. I couldn't understand the plot. I didn't know who was doing what to who. Anyway, I had a lot of fun doing it. We went out to Dubai to film, Abu Dhabi. And one of the scenes was on the Abu Dhabi F1 racetrack. And it was amazing to be in Abu Dhabi. And I really liked Michael Bay, who a lot of people didn't like. He's very capricious. He's a tremendous controller. I didn't know until we were there that not only did he direct Transformers and create Transformers, he owns it. He owns the merchandising.
Oh, right.
So if you can imagine owning the merchandising of Transformer toys,
yes,
that's a few bob.
Yeah.
And but he's very hands-on. He operates the camera himself a lot, which is great. He doesn't. Money seems to be no object. We had the scenes I was in involved. We were Russian. We weren't Russian. We were some kind of foreign baddies. Involved a lot of girls prancing around with very little on, and they had to be on the cast list. They were called. What were they called? Something like nuns or something, because being in Abu Dhabi, they couldn't be called prostitutes or hookers or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, but they were dressed in La Perla underwear, Louboutin shoes, thousands of dollars spent on costumes you wouldn't really see. You know, they were just sort of. And one of the actors, they said, "Oh yeah, I've got this Tom Ford suit." I think, well, why? Why is so much money being spent on? But yeah, that's why he has to have the best and the most expensive. And well, But he also is quite capricious. And famously, there was one lady who has done a lot of films with him. And she says, well, he'll fire somebody. And then the next day he'll say, I want George. Go, where's George? So, well, you fired him yesterday. He's gone back to America. Get him back. Get him back. Yes, he's quite capricious.
Yeah. Another director of note recently, Matthew Vaughn for the
yes. Again, it was only, I went out to Milan to film. It was the last day of filming of that sequence. There was a little bit more filming after that. All very impatient. He's very distant. I can't say I had any communication with him really. Yeah, Matthew Vaughn, I can't say much about.
Yeah.
He, I mean, there were lots of stories about him, but I won't repeat them.
That's okay. I wondered, have you had a favourite studio that you've worked in, either in the UK, US, or I mean, many people say Parma Studios is one of their favourite places to work. Do you have a preference?
I can't say that I do. A studio is pretty much a studio, I think. Having said that, I did a film in Ghana. This was the one that Chiwetel the first. It was called Deadly Voyage. And it was about a bunch of Ghanaian, it was a true story of a bunch of Ghanaian stowaways on a Russian ship.
Yeah.
And this particular ship had been impounded by American authorities or something because they were smuggling something. Anyway, there were these stowaways on the ship, and ship went off, and somebody discovered that there were these stowaways, and they didn't dare, they didn't know what to do. Anyway, they killed them one by one. They threw them overboard and hunted them down on the ship, and except one of them. And one of them, they got to Le Havre, and this one guy who'd been hiding in the air conditioning ducts managed to get off and go to the police. And initially he wasn't believed, but then he was believed, and the crew were arrested. And while we were filming it, they were actually on trial. And they were, in fact, Ukrainians. They weren't Russians, they were Ukrainians. And they were sent down for a very long time for these murders. Anyway, we filmed in Ghana, and we filmed in a ship, and we filmed in the cargo hold of a ship filled with cocoa sacks. They were hiding in this cargo hold. Well, in Ghana, in the summer, in midday, a cargo hold is extremely hot. And it was refreshingly cool at, 40 degrees outside. And also the interior of the ship is quite dangerous. It's a dangerous environment. Anyway, we filmed there, but we had to do some pickup shots. We did them back in England in a studio. And lo and behold, a studio looks exactly, a Bear studio looks exactly like a cargo hold. I mean, everything could have been done in the studio, but there you go.
Yeah. You were the dialogue coach on Mission Impossible with the first.
Yes, that was fun. He was very good. He learned some Russian, which I helped him with, which he did very well. I then met him again. I worked with Nicole Kidman on The Peacemaker, and that was at the time when they were together. And so he came to visit the set quite a lot.
Yeah,
and he was very, very nice, very charming, very engaging chap. Yeah, I mean, I think particularly when he was visiting, when he wasn't really involved with the film, he was just being sociable and pleasant. He had no responsibilities, so
yeah,
it was very easy.
And I think George Clooney was in the Peacemaker. Did you encounter George?
Clooney was in that, and he was great. I can't say Clooney and Kidman didn't get on terribly well together. Well, they were fine. It wasn't they didn't get on. It was just, it was a most extraordinary film in that so much, there was so much expectation on it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a particularly good project. It was, I had quite an unfortunate experience on that. I did an audition for it, for a really good part. And I was told that, yes, they really liked me. And I was sent for a costume fitting and all of that. And then I was told, oh God, what was his? Armin Muller-Stahl, who had just had a big success with The Pianist, playing the father, Geoffrey Rush's father.
Yeah.
He's an Austrian actor. And I was told, we've got this other actor who we're waiting to see if he'll do it. If he doesn't do it, you've got the part. But if he does. So I had this rather strange thing where Armin Muller-Stahl got the part and I had to dialogue coach him.
Right.
And he actually, I have to say, was very bad because he didn't care. He's another of these actors who's also a director. He has his projects and he was in it for the money to finance whatever project he was on.
Yeah.
Really didn't care about the film. And they got very frustrated with him and had to cut some of his scenes and so forth because he just wasn't giving anything. So that was rather unfortunate because I would have loved to have that part, and it was potentially a very good part of George Clooney's buddy and so forth. But there you go. There you go. That's life.
Was there many parts that you came very close to like that, or things that you turned down? Perhaps you wish you had.
Well, yes. Well, funnily enough, the one I did in Canada, the George Segal one, the director initially wanted me to play the main baddie, who was a Russian, but then picked a Swedish actor who had just been in a very successful film with Robert Redford, and so they picked him, and he was not good. And not only did I have to coach him, but I then revoiced him.
Yeah.
Because yeah. My part was done by somebody else, but I revoiced him.
Right. We did have quite an interesting question come in about obviously having played various Russian roles. Do you think that obviously the problems we're having with Russia at the moment, whether or not that's going to just keep stereotypes going? And did you find that you've always played stereotypical Russians in how do you see it kind of progressing?
Oh, that's a tough one. Of course, now dramas that have Russian characters in it will have an awful lot of baggage, perceptions. I mean, the Russians are good people, don't get me wrong, very good people, but they they won the war by being very violent. And it's partly human life, well, under the communist regime, human life really didn't have much value.
No.
And we know from experience that they had a deliberate famine. They had people in the gulags dying all the time because they needed labor, these labor camps, and so forth. And things like the Battle of Stalingrad, and the major battles, could only happen if you were prepared to sacrifice a lot of lives. Now, even the Germans and certainly not the British or the Allies would wage a war on that basis, that we've got more men, we can kill more men and overwhelm them, and it doesn't matter. I mean, they would send, in Stalingrad, they were sending, first of all, prisoners ahead with no guns into the enemy firing line. And they didn't have enough guns. So when the soldiers, there would be one gun for 3 soldiers, and the guy with the gun, if he was dropped dead, then they'd pick up the gun and keep running. So it was visceral. And they were known when they got to Berlin for being drunk and raping and all the rather unpleasant things we're hearing of now. And it's, I mean, I'm personally deeply upset about what's going on. They can be really violent people. And of course, they're being directed by always sort of false notions.
Well, yeah, that's
also, you see, I remember when there was the Hungarian Revolution, the Czech went into Czechoslovakia, all of which happened in my time. Actually, the guys who were in the tanks, the guys who were sent in, weren't Russians. They were mostly from Mongolia, from Siberia, and they were just told, these are, you know, American revolutionaries and you've got to kill them. And that's what they believed.
Yeah.
I was also at, I was in Hong Kong when Tiananmen happened. And we had seen all of the students on television and so forth weeks before, occupying Tiananmen Square and so forth. And I was filming a night shoot just outside the city. And we were in this rural area in a derelict building, derelict house. And I stepped out in the middle of the night to have a cigarette. And the crew, the lighting men and so forth, who were local, were listening to transistor radios and weeping. I said, what's happened? I said, well, the tanks have gone in and they're crushing people with tanks and killing everybody. And yeah. And again, with the Chinese, they were not people from Beijing. They were people from the provinces in the army who were doing that stuff. And the word was they were also drugged.
Right.
So anyway, no, it's very difficult. And what's going to happen dramatically now, as far as Russians are concerned, I don't know. Because that kind of stereotype of the KGB baddie has kind of passed, and we've had 20 years or more of no Cold War.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, interesting to see what will happen.
You know, the baddies have now, they've been Arabs and terrorists and so forth.
You say it might revert perhaps to the
who knows?
All sorts of things, really. I've just had a look at the questions just to wrap up the evening. Is anything we haven't already covered? I want to briefly just mention Spooks, because that was opposite Peter Firth, whereas that was interesting.
Yes, I only did. I played this part of a Mossad agent, and I had, in fact, my scenes are with Peter Firth, who is a superb actor, and such a nice man.
Yeah.
And I regret my character didn't come back. I would have liked to have done more with him.
Yeah.
We were kind of in the story, we were kind of equals, you know, as the head of some Mossad bureau, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So was it sort of pitched you as a kind of a recurring character, or one that could, but it just didn't kind of happen that way?
No, it didn't, unfortunately. Unfortunately,
okay.
that would have been fun.
CIS New Professionals. Is that?
Yes, they did a kind of remake of The Professionals. Again, I don't remember it terribly well. It was probably just a couple of days' work.
Yeah.
This is the problem. You know, they go down on the CV, and for all you know, I might have been on it for a month or one day. And probably in that case, it was a day.
Yeah.
You go in and do your scene or two, and that's it.
Yeah. I mean, do you prefer, well, obviously from a financial point of view, longer projects are better, but did you like sort of just coming in and out? Was it?
Not really. I didn't like coming in and out, because I was saying earlier, it's a little bit like getting on a train and getting off again, and everyone's going on having fun.
Yeah.
you know, you've been and gone, and that's it. You're dust. Yeah, I would prefer to have more engagement. But listen, I can't control those things.
Oh no, no. Well, would you fancy that, like a long run in a TV series, for example, or a soap, or with that
I've
kind
never
of thing?
done one. I've never done. I mean, I've never done more than a couple of episodes, 2 or 3 episodes of anything that I can remember. I mean, way back, I did a children's series that was fairly extraordinary, a BBC series that went through Spain and Morocco and God knows where else. But yeah, I haven't often been a regular character.
Yeah, I suppose the thrill of being an actor is to experience all those different roles and to not be stuck in a job, or
Well, yes, there's that.
Yeah,
There's good and bad, you know, all of it, and you don't have a huge amount of control over that. I mean, I'm a tart. I do what I'm paid for, frankly.
well, yeah, don't we all? Yeah.
I'm not usually in a position where I can say no.
Yeah.
So now I'm old enough to say no. I said no, I can't be asked.
Is it always exciting to never know quite what way you're going, or is it?
Well, I think so. I happen to think so. I mean, when I married my first wife, my parents-in-law were very, very traditional people who saved money, who knew where they were going, they had regular work and so on and so forth. And they simply didn't understand that the insecurity of an actor's life, that you really didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah, yeah.
And I would say, well, yes, that's what I love. I don't know what's going to happen. I could be filming in Jamaica next week.
Yeah.
And or not. And that's what has always kept me going. I mean, I like living for the moment. I really enjoy every day as it comes. I feel hugely blessed with my life, and it wasn't the life that was planned, or that people thought was going to happen. People thought there were going to be great things and major acting career, which didn't happen. But it has, in its own way, been so rewarding and so exciting. So I've been so privileged to travel everywhere all over the world and work with the most amazing people.
Yeah. I mean, you never got to a point where at any time you sort of felt, well, I may leave it, or you didn't get disillusioned. You just always
no. Oh
enjoyed
God,
it, start to finish.
God, no. I live on set. I feel so alive. And people say, yes, but you're on top of a mountain in the middle of the night and it's freezing cold and it's wet and you're standing out in the rain and nothing's happening. How can you? I said, I love it. I love it. I love every minute of it. It just gives me a huge charge.
Yeah. Well, it's exciting stuff, isn't it? And it's not.
I think so. I mean, you know, my beloved partner of many years has come to set. It's a bit boring. Nothing's happening.
I mean, do you prefer working in TV or film? Because obviously TV is a quicker pace. Do you?
Well, nowadays it kind of overlaps a lot. The techniques of television, or particularly a series like, I don't know, Gangs of London, something like that, it's very much like a film, with film cameras and so forth. I mean, I have done back in the day sort of semi-live television, all that kind of thing, a lot of pressure. So filming is my real love. And the whole process of filmmaking, I just love it. I love it. And I love the people in it. I love the atmosphere.
Yeah. You mentioned doing live TV. I mean, that must be quite a nerve-wracking experience.
Oh yes, of course. But it's okay. You know, you kind of got used to it. I didn't do that much because it had pretty much finished by that. I did once, as an experiment, they did a live television series a different play each week for a season. I don't know, there were 5 or 6, however many it was. And the director, in fact, was Mike Newell. The play was, the writers and the director got together on Monday. They wrote the half-hour play. On Tuesday, it was cast. Wednesday, rehearsal. Thursday, Friday, rehearsal. Saturday, we shot it live.
Yeah.
Pat Stewart was in it too, I remember. And there were lots of changes. Not costume, you had to be in different sets. There was the studio with the different sets. He was running from one to the other. And I said to Mike Newell, I said, why aren't you filming the stuff that's happening between scenes? You're trying to make a slick play.
Yeah.
Live and there will be glitches, there will be mistakes, but you're trying to hide them. And it would be interesting for the audience to actually see what's going wrong, to see what's happening. But no, they didn't. And it was a silly experiment, really.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly very interesting. I mean, when you do stage work, particularly long runs, and you're doing, say, 8 performances a week, does it become mechanical, or you always sort of develop?
Not really. I've never done a long run of a play. I've done, I mean, seasons of, do, for instance, the Royal Shakespeare Company, but you're doing plays in repertoire, you're doing different.
It's always mixing.
You're doing 3 plays. Today it's Macbeth, tomorrow it's, As You Like It, whatever it is. But anything I've done for any length of time, probably 3 months the longest. No, it's the adrenaline. I mean, I'm still impressed when people like something like Jerusalem, where they're doing 8 shows a week, and it's so physically demanding and exhausting. I'm so impressed. But I remember I did it, of course, and the audience gives you so much adrenaline, so much energy, and there's always an excitement, and then things change. Suddenly, you do it a little bit differently, a little bit.
Yeah, you always sort of. I mean, I remember seeing Simon Callow doing it was being Shakespeare, and he's playing all different, Shakespeare's life, and there's a Q&A afterwards, and somebody asked him that question: does it just get boring, or how? And he said, well, I never get it right. I'm always improving on this and that. So it's always interesting from that point of view. And one thing I didn't ask you about was Whoops Apocalypse. You did an episode of that with John Cleese. Did you remember that at all?
Oh, wow. Yes. Apocalypse, yes, Apocalypse.
Yeah.
I do remember something about that, but I don't remember what now. It does ring a bell. Can't even remember what I played. Sorry, the dog's trying to get it again. I think Apocalypse. In you come. Come on. No, it's gone. I can't remember it.
That's okay. The episode was called, if anybody that may want to look it up, Lucifer and the Lord, and it was John Reardon who directed that one. It had Barry Morse, John Barron, Ed Bishop, Alexis Sale.
John Barron was a neighbour of mine.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. And John Cleese, of course. David Kelly.
I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, and you were the French commanding officer in that one.
Yes. Yes. What was I? Some mad general or something.
It looked like quite a wacky thing to.
Yes, I think it probably was. I think it was way off beam. It was a little bit like I did something called Max Headroom, which was way off beam, but great fun.
Yeah.
And then became a TV series, I think. It was a one-off film originally.
Yeah. Did you encounter John Cleese on anything, or
no? No.
So just finishing, just got a couple of questions from the audience and to finish off. You worked on Atomic Blonde with Charlize Theron. Did you?
No,
Did,
that's not true. I didn't do anything on that, and it just popped up on IMDb, and no is the answer. I'm sorry, that's a fake.
It's not always reliable, IMDb, unfortunately, but
no, not entirely. I have no idea how that happened.
No, I guess that's fair
I
enough.
love Charlize Theron. I wish I had.
Oh, she's a marvelous actress, isn't she?
Oh,
Yeah.
she's wonderful, wonderful actress. I thought Monster was amazing.
Yes, it was, wasn't it? Yeah, anything where you got somebody incredibly talented and beautiful, and you sort of strip all that away, it must be quite brave of an actor to do that as well. So has there been anything that you've ever turned down that you wish you hadn't, maybe in more sort of recent years? Any parts of, no? And so I just have a couple of questions to finish off for myself. What was your favorite project in your career, and why?
What was what?
What was your favorite project in your career?
Project. Oh gosh. Probably one of the things I had most fun on was a film called Birthday Girl with Nicole Kidman.
Yeah.
Which we made in Australia. And probably the most challenging and exciting was The Last Emperor. And that was just such an extraordinary, life-changing experience.
Yeah.
And also an extraordinary experience was another Bertolucci film called Little Buddha with Keanu Reeves, which we filmed in Kathmandu and in Bhutan, this closed mountain kingdom, and in Seattle. And that was with Chris, the singer actor, I can't remember his name now, and the Fonda, Jane Fonda.
Oh yeah.
Not Jane Fonda.
No.
The other Fonda, the daughter, granddaughter of Henry Fonda. Anyway, that was extraordinary to be in those countries. In Nepal. Nepal is so beautiful and the people are so wonderful. That was very exciting.
Yeah. I've got the final audience question. Is there a particular type of part or role that you would like to play but you haven't? Something that, maybe a classical role, or you want to play a particular type of villain, or is there something that you'd like to get your teeth into?
No, it's a very good question. The answer is no. I mean, everything has its own sort of challenge, and whether it's a villain or a goodie or a grandfather or a whatever, no, everything is interesting to do. Of course, it depends on the writing.
Oh yeah.
That's so key. And good writing is such a pleasure when something is well written. And you don't have to memorize it practically, because it just I like comedy. I like to do comedy.
Yeah.
And I've not done as much as I would like to. I've always enjoyed comedy. I love improvising, playing off people and things. Yeah.
Because of course you worked with Steve Coogan on and Partridge, so that must have been quite fun.
That was great fun. And I did another Chris Morris thing too. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of anarchic but fun. And again, very challenging. Terrific to work with. Very wonderful people to work with.
And they always say that comedy is a very hard thing to do in terms of, because it's all about timing and things. It's very
Uh,
serious.
I don't find it that hard. I
Yeah.
just love it. um, it's such a joy to do comedy.
Hmm.
Again, it depends on the writing, you know.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Uh,
I mean, but you found Steve Coogan quite interesting to.
I have turned down a couple of comedy series. I just read the script. I thought, no, I mean,
Yeah,
I would love to do comedy, but this is just so
yeah.
horrible.
I think that's a great thing with someone like Steve Coogan, who's so, sharp, got an edge to him, and it's very sort of.
Well, the way we did that program was we would improvise. We knew what the scene would be about, but
Yeah.
it wasn't written down. And we knew we had to get from A to B. We improvised and we played around and we said, no, that doesn't work. This works. Why don't we do this? And then it would be written down. So it was a process which happened quite quickly. We only rehearsed for a week. And then we filmed it, or it was put on camera, recorded with a live audience. But we didn't see the audience. We were on a closed set doing the thing. The audience was outside the set watching us on monitors. And I think the object was that we would get their reactions rather than having a recorded audience, taped audience. So yes, we that was great fun. When we did it twice, ran it through twice, and then they edited it the way they wanted to. Yeah.
And finally, what does the future hold? If you got those projects coming up?
I'm very old now. There isn't a whole lot of future. I don't think, but whatever comes. I'm now at a stage and of an age where I'm happy to consider anything. I've done a few student films which I really enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And in fact, I love doing student films because you're surrounded by so much energy and so much a desire to learn, and it's lovely. It's great to do student movies.
Yeah. Is writing ever appeal to you? Sort of writing, either scripts or books.
No, I've never. Well, I have a tremendous weakness, and that is I give up very easily on any kind of ideas or projects I might have. If somebody says, "Oh, I don't think that's a good idea," I won't pursue it.
Yeah.
Which is why I never became a director. I did do some directing,
and
I really enjoyed it, and I loved working with actors, which is why dialogue coaching was so perfect for me. I didn't have that responsibility of being a director, but I was working with actors. And I realized, but I could direct well, but I didn't have the determination to go against any negative input, and nowadays, and even then probably, if to be a film director or a TV director, you also have to, well, first of all, you've got to have a lot of determination, a lot of strength, but you also have to kind of play the game, the studios and suits, because everything is suits, and they're not necessarily creative people.
No.
So you have to have tremendous, what I call, stick-to-itiveness, and I don't have that.
I think it is a, show business being the bigger word of the two, and there is a lot of people in the business, ironically, that aren't, creative, and it's about the bottom line and all that sort of thing. So it must be quite challenging at times. It sounds like. So is there anything that you, any project or anything you wanted to mention before we come to an end, or do you think we've covered most things?
No, I think you've been very generous with your time, and I've banged on, and I hope a little of what I've said has been of interest, and
Oh yeah, everything I would say from my point of view. So it's
That's very,
really,
very kind of you. Very kind indeed.
yeah, it's been a really interesting evening, and thank you for spending so much time chatting to me. It is very much appreciated, and it's been wonderful hearing about your wonderful career.
Well, I think it's been wonderful, even though it hasn't been very starry. It's certainly been wonderful.
But I suppose it is also, you've had a career that has lasted so long as well, because a lot of actors may have some bigger roles, but they fade out very quickly. But to have that
I'm
consistent career,
still plugging on.
yeah, I think it is quite difficult. I think in in that industry. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I guess.
yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much again for
Thank
joining.
you very much. I've really enjoyed it, and good luck with your other. I think it's such fun what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I've been very entertained doing it for the last sort of year or so, and hopefully the people that I talk to find it at least half as interesting as I do. So yeah, it's been good fun.
Good. Well, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much for joining me.
All
And,
right.
enjoy the rest of your week, and take care.
Thank you. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.